Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and you take time to listen into the podcast. I really appreciate you. I say it all the time and I will continue to say it. I appreciate you. And because you've been faithful listeners, you've helped the podcast become ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So thank you for doing that. And you can help us keep the podcast going if you go over and rate, subscribe, and review. Really would appreciate that. All right. Now, today I'm talking with Janice Litvin. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Janice. Janice is on a mission to help leaders and teams banish burnout in their organization. As an award winning corporate wellness speaker, she wants to help as many people as possible take care of their mental health, specifically teaching them to manage stress to prevent burnout. Now, let me say, who doesn't need that?
Yeah.
And she has developed unique strategies to maximize engagement in workplace wellness and has developed a stress management methodology, which I can't wait to hear more about that, which we will find available in her workbook, Banish Burnout Toolkit. And in the past, Janice has helped Fortune 500 clients in their need for technology talent. And those clients included Charles Schwab, Oracle, The Gap, Symantec, Nokia, the United States Army, and so many more. Welcome, Janice Litvin.
Thank you so much, Robin Owens. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm glad you're here. All right, so now I read your formal kind of introduction and bio, but why don't you tell us whatever you want to tell us in your own words about yourself and then about your work?
So, as you said, I'm a burnout speaker and coach. And by that, I mean I go to companies and associations and teach people two different phases of burnout. Number one, for the individuals to understand how to reframe their thoughts in reaction to burnout. And today, I'm sure we'll get into it. And then number two, my newer focus has been to help managers and leaders reframe their culture, their values, and their policies so that the individuals are not burning out in the first place.
Yes. It's so important these days, burnout. Was there something like what led you to this work? I know you had a rich history of other types of work, but what brought you to this point of focusing in on preventing burnout?
Well, I was doing, as you alluded to, I was doing workplace wellness strategy sessions and presentations. And then I was seeing, as I went to client sites, I was seeing that people were telling me, well, I don't have time to go to all those wellness activities. I'm overwhelmed and overworked. And so I began to see that stress and burnout was the bigger issue. So I started focusing on helping people with burnout.
Ah, I see. All right. So now I guess over the time, it sounds like you developed some strategies in which you now teach in your Banish Burnout Toolkit. So tell us a little bit about the toolkit.
Well, as you know, with any behavior change, we have to start with awareness. And so the first tool I teach helps people realize that it's normal to react to stress. Stress happens, things happen all the time, almost every day of the week for some people. The problem is a lot of us tend to overreact and overblow things and stay upset for a long time. That's the part that causes the problem. So there are a lot of cases where we don't need to be that angry. For example, you're in a long line at the grocery store, and I know during COVID this was bothering everybody. You'd be in a really long line, and then we had to be 6 feet apart. So the line would go all the way to the back of the store. And people were just like, oh gosh, I can't stand this. But, you know, they had to get their groceries and their paper towels. And I caught myself one day getting really worked up over this long line. And this was around the time I was developing this toolkit. And I thought to myself, how can I teach this tool if I'm victimizing myself? So I need to teach myself so I can teach others. And what I started doing was asking myself this simple question: does this degree of anger and angst really need to go with this situation? A long line in the grocery store is no reason to ruin your night, or ruin your day. It's not that important. So it's partly about keeping things in perspective. And I talk to myself in the lines and I say, are my hands and are my arms broken? Are my legs broken? If I'm okay and my family's okay, it's okay.
Yes, yes.
So I teach people, number one, pay attention to what they're thinking. And if they are getting worked up over something that's really not important, to put it in perspective, let it go. And in the case of the grocery store line, my adult son actually taught me this. Mom, when you go up to the counter, ask the person working, how's their day going? Can you imagine worrying about them instead of making them worry about you? And when you ask that question, they smile, and you feel better because you made somebody's day and you showed you cared.
Tell your son that was a good tip.
Yeah, he's very wise for his age.
Very good tip. Now, what if somebody's thinking about, well, what's the signs of burnout? Like, do they know? Like, some people might not be aware. So, what's something you've learned in your work that you can let us know is a sign of burnout?
Well, I'll tell you a short vignette that will be an obvious one, and then I'll tell you the more subtle ones. During COVID, when people were shuttered in their homes, I thought this is a no-brainer. My husband has one part of the house, I have an office, my son had an office. We already work from home. No-brainer, no problem. One day, I was in the kitchen, I'd made myself some eggs or something, and I put the skillet in the sink and I turned on the cold water like my mama taught me. And my husband said, you're not supposed to do that. I'm laughing because it's so stupid. He said, you're not supposed to do that. I started screaming and yelling, don't tell me how to wash the dishes. And I realized very quickly that I was stressed from not being able to see my friends and being stuck at home. Yes, we went out for walks, but not being able to go anywhere, not
Yeah.
being able to go out to lunch with a friend or go to the movies or go to any parties. And I realized that I wasn't paying close enough attention. It was a subtle feelings that were bubbling up inside me. Of course, I apologized. And then I said to him, this weekend, we're going to drive to our friend's house. And even if we have to sit in the driveway and they sit on their lawn, we're going to have a conversation. Well, they put out a big picnic blanket and brought out the wine and cheese. And that was it. We started getting together every week after that. So
That's
that's one obvious sign, me overreacting and yelling at my poor husband. There are some other subtle clues at work, and some of those are withdrawing, like just not being as engaged. You know, everybody's so worn out from all the Zoom meetings. When people keep their cameras off, even though they've been asked to turn them on, especially in their own work team meetings, or they don't show up, or they're real late or leave real early, or they're just not as engaged. That's a huge clue that something's going on. Or they're calling in sick suddenly a lot. That's a big clue.
mm,
Or people can't sleep, people can't eat, people are feeling exhausted mentally and emotionally. A lot of those are some of the clues.
yes, makes sense. Now, let's want to reflect on you and your journey a little bit. You've been doing this sort of it started out with a broader sort of wellness in the workplace. Is there anything that you can remember from little Janice that you could see from back then is now showing up in the work now? Maybe when you were in elementary school or, is there anything, any connection that you see, any parallels?
Like what can you be more specific?
Were you the one in elementary school saying to the kids, "Take care of your health," or were you
No.
the were you the one who said, "It's important for your well-being in any way," or were you a caretaker, or is this a
Oh,
new kind of part of you? You know what I mean? Is there
Oh, yes,
any
I do.
connection?
Yes. Yes, now I see what you're saying. First of all, I took ballet my whole life, so I was always dancing around the school, dancing by my desk whenever I could get up and dance, and I was always talking. Here's what's funny. I used to get D's in conduct, but I was developing a skill. Now,
Yes.
now I get paid for talking. That's my little joke. But yes, I was the kind of person that if someone needed something, I was right there. If someone was sad, I was right there. If someone needed help, I was the first one to raise my hand. I was brought up to help your fellow person, so to
Yes.
speak. And so
Yeah.
I was the one that was right there when someone needed something.
Yeah. And the reason why I asked that question because a lot of times um people whatever, however they were in their early years, somehow show it comes back around. It's a different version of it, but it tends to show up. And in this podcast, we're talking to people who are looking for more meaning and purpose in their work. And often they can find clues in their early life. There's some part of them that might come back around, like with you, with your, you were talkative and now you're a speaker, and,
That's very insightful, especially in terms of helping people find their purpose. I think that's really, really insightful.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So now that we're on the subject of purpose, do you think it's important for you and or anyone to have a sense of purpose in their work?
Yeah, for me, it's very important. But as I was contemplating that question in preparing for this podcast, I was thinking back to some jobs that I had that I wasn't very happy in. I liked the people around me, but I didn't like the work or something like that. There was one job that I loved, and I talk a lot about in one of my keynotes, where I liked the people around me, but I also had what I call the world's best boss. And so because he took such good care of me in terms of my career and emotionally too, if he saw I was having a bad day, he was right on it. He was very emotionally intelligent before that was a thing.
Hmm.
And he would there's so many examples of things he did for me. For example, so this was a software consultant support sales support role. So I would go to clients. Number one, I got to talk for a living. So that automatically I knew it was going to be a good fit. And I would go to clients and either help with the salespeople with closing the deals from the technical perspective, or I would support the clients after the deal was closed and they had technical problems. And one day he came to me and he said, I think you should be the trainer for our division, the software trainer. And I thought, okay, that sounds kind of interesting. Here's the funny thing, talking about tying you back to your childhood. When I was a little girl, my mother bought me a little blackboard and chalk, and I used to pretend I was standing up teaching, like I was a teacher. Isn't that funny?
Yes.
And so I became the software trainer. And actually, that's what qualified me to join National Speakers Association back in the 80s. And
Oh.
I loved helping people overcome their fear of computers. This was before every office in America had a laptop. We
Mhm.
had a time sharing terminal that hooked up through a telephone landline with a modem and a coupler and a telephone, the old telephone handle, which a lot of people don't even know what that is. But and so being a trainer back then and having people in a training class where this might have been the first time they had their hands on a keyboard for a computer, and walking around the room and one by one saying, okay, hit this, hit that, now let's write down what we did so you'll remember.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I loved it. I just loved it. I loved it.
So your inner trainer came back to you. You
Yes.
and he
Yes.
must have seen the teacher in you or the trainer in you, which is why he recommended that.
Well, I think it was because had an outgoing personality, because I hadn't really done a lot of training per se, but I was outgoing and I attracted people to the events we had. So he must have figured that it
Yeah.
was a good
Yeah,
thing.
that's great. I love that story. I love that story. All right. Um, the podcast is for what I call high achieving women. Now, let me give you my definition of high achieving women because you might have yours and other people have theirs. And this is my definition. A high achieving woman is a woman who is responsible, goal oriented, ambitious in a positive way. She is someone that people come to in her professional life and ask her questions, whether it's related to her role or not. They come to her for advice and support in her home life, family, friends, community, neighbors, whatever. People ask her questions, come to her for advice or support, whether it's related to anything she knows or not. And she's just giving out support in both places. And she's good at a couple things. And like you, she may have written a book. So people feel like, well, she doesn't need any support because she's doing all these things. And so I thought, well, who supports them while they're supporting everyone else?
Right.
So when I started the podcast, I said, all right, that will be the goal to support high achieving women. And then as the seasons went on, I thought, okay, especially those who are feeling like in the midst of all that, they're yearning for more meaning and purpose in their work. Everything looks good on paper, but just something's missing. And it's just, they feel like they want more. And so I thought I'd get people who are in their purpose, living their purpose, or have expertise in things that might prevent us from having purpose, like burnout, come in and talk to these women. So that's who we're talking to now, that high achieving woman who is doing all the things and feeling like there's just something missing and she wants more in her. All right. So now with that in mind, what's something from your experience anywhere along your life with little Janice or Janice today or your work would you say to that high achieving woman who is saying, I just need more. I just need more.
Well, before I answer this question, I have to ask you one. Are these high achieving women entrepreneurs, or are they working in corporate, or maybe both?
They can be either or. Let's say either or. Yeah.
That's what I figured, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
So they're feeling like there needs to be more,
Yeah, they're feeling like there's
or
no sense of
something's.
meaning. Like, so what? I'm just going through the routine. This is
Well,
not
that
meaningful
can
to
be
me.
caused by a lot of different things. One thing that I've observed from colleagues of mine in the working world who are gainfully employed is that they'll get in a job. Let's say they've been assigned as VP of HR of a large division of a very large company. And it was challenging at first. Now they found their stride. And now it's years later, and the company loves them in the role, but now they've outgrown the role. But the company wants them in the role for whatever reason. And then they get that feeling of there's something missing. Do they quit? Do they approach their leadership to say, I've outgrown the role. I think I might be better suited. I've learned so much along the way. I think I would be better suited. I've identified three possible, or whatever they can do. I think it's a matter of number one, paying attention to yourself. Like I said before, awareness is the first key. And then, journaling is the best way to uncover answers to our own problems, right? One day I drove to Sacramento from San Francisco, an hour and a half, to ask someone a question, and he turned it back around on me, and so I had my own answer. I just forgot that maybe the answer was already inside me. So a lot of times we just need to stop and listen to ourselves and do a lot of writing, speaking with someone we trust, either a colleague, a partner, or friend, or relative, whoever you can really and truly trust, and hopefully someone at your workplace if you are gainfully employed, or someone in your community. Like for us, we have National Speakers Association, and really start talking about what's bothering you and try to get at why and what needs to be done to change it. Because a lot of times the answers are in there.
Yes, I do believe that self-awareness is the key. I am, a champion for self-reflection and journaling, as you say, is a good way to get into that, what's going on inside of you. Yeah, and I believe purpose is basically when you're being true to who you are. And if you don't know who you are, you won't get there. So, to your point, journaling is a way to get at what's going on inside there.
That's you opened, I don't know if you realize that you just opened up a huge can of worms if you don't know who you are. That's an interesting conundrum, and I have to think back. I think when I was younger, I didn't know who I was. Now I feel very confident that I'm doing what I'm meant to do, and I feel, it took me many years to get here, but I feel deeply connected to my work and my passion for my work. But I can't imagine not knowing. But looking back to that younger business person, I didn't know I needed to be a trainer. I didn't know I could do consulting. I didn't know I could be a speaker. And so, but there was a hole for me. I just didn't know how to fill it. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yes, and now you and I are hopefully encouraging and inspiring those people who have that whole, what no matter where they are in their career journey, where they're in the younger, earlier career, and some people I talk to are at a stage where, like I've done this for years and decades, and now what? So
Yeah.
I'm convinced that this conversation will inspire them.
Well, and you know what you just reminded me of without realizing it? As we get more wise, we, and you alluded to this earlier, the act of helping others helps us, not only for the happiness chemicals for doing a good deed, but also because we can see in others what we need to learn for ourselves
Yeah.
sometimes when other people have challenges and questions.
Yeah. Yes. Well, it sounds like you're doing amazing work, and I appreciate you for taking time out of your busy schedule and all that you have going on to be here with us today. Now, before we tell people how they can get in touch with you, is there anything else that's bubbling up in your mind or comes to your mind that you want to share one more thought before we tell people how to reach you?
Well, for those of you listeners out there who are in a position of leadership or management, it's really, really important to treat employees the way they need to be treated, not just the way you wish you had been treated, but the way they need to be treated. That means knowing them. And knowing them means time and communication and commitment and really understanding where they're coming from and why, what their passion is and what their purpose is and what will help them excel, meeting the needs of the team, but at the same time meeting their needs of connecting to their purpose and their passion.
Yes, yes. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that wisdom. Now, I'm guessing some people might want to say, well, where? Where can I hear more? How can I get more? Or so tell people where they can be in touch with you.
Well, first of all, my website, Janice at janicelitvin.com is my email. I'm on LinkedIn. I think there is one other Janice Litvin, but she lives somewhere else. I live in Northern California. And I would like to offer a resource to your listeners, and that is janicelitvin.com/resources hyphen book. I hope that wasn't too confusing.
Okay, say it again.
janicelitvin.com/resources hyphen book.
Okay, we got it. And we'll have it in the show notes.
Okay.
Janice, thank you so much for sharing your time, your wisdom, and expertise. Really appreciate you.
The pleasure is all mine, Robin. Thank you so much.
Okay, everyone, and I'd love to hear your response to this episode. I'd love just drop me a message at LinkedIn. Well, I'm on all the social media channels, but I spend most of my time at LinkedIn, and it's at Robin L. Owens, PhD, at Robin L. Owens, PhD. Or if you're the person that I talked about and you're really feeling like you want more meaning and more purpose, it's just not there anymore, then head on over to the podcast website, and I too have a free resource for you. The podcast website is leadershippurposepodcast.com, leadershippurposepodcast.com. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin.